Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button before you leave today, that helps get my channel promoted pretty well. I also love it when people comment. That also is helpful. And I enjoy hearing what you have to think, so leave me some comments. Today I'm going to do kind of a simple pendant, so I think this will probably be categorized as a beginner project. We're going to use a big oval cabochon, and I'm going to make it's sort of a variation of a tube bail, but it's going to have two separate pieces that kind of spiral like a piece of ribbon, and so the chain will go through those, and then I'll put a little bit of decoration on the bottom of the pendant, I think, and we'll see how that comes out. I think we'll probably call it a ribbon bail pendant or something like that. Before we get started though, I wanted to thank some people. My YouTube subscribers are approaching 5,000. You guys rock. Thank you so much for taking the time to check out my channel. You know, share it with your friends. I'd love to have more. I've met some really nice people here, and I continue to enjoy our interactions, so thanks for subscribing. My patrons over on Patreon are also a big part of this, and they're paying for my premium content, so a large portion of the income I get from this comes from that, and I wanted to thank them for that. Any kind of stuff like that helps, though, if you want to be a supporter of the channel. You can check out the Patreon. There's a $5 level monthly tier where you can get all of this without any ads, if you want that. And then there's some other tiers that offer some other perks, like exclusive tutorials and some live streaming and stuff like that. So, and a really lot of nice people over there, really talented. I've learned so much. I hope they are getting as much as I am. So check that out in the video description, but let's get started on this project. Alright, so here's a few of the cabs that I was thinking about. I picked out a bunch of largish oval ones of varying sizes. I have a couple of Malachites. This is called Morado Opal. This would be onyx. Fossil coral from Indonesia, which this is a really reddish one, which I've been looking at for a long time, and I was considering doing for this one. A couple of labradorites, ruby and zoisite. Amazonite, these are both Colorado Amazonites, and blue lace agate, and then some crazy lace. I think I'm going to go with the malachite. It seems to work well with a ribbony kind of look, so we'll use that one. I think this one has a little bit better finish than this one, so I'll set these to the side for now. Use those another day for a different project. Alright, this is a design idea book that's in my merch store. I really like them because it has graph paper, but it doesn't have the lines, so it allows you to keep things kind of proportional and stuff without having those lines interfering with your drawing. So I sketched up a few different things. They're all basically the same design with different shaped stones. This would be the one that we ended up going with. It's about a 30 by 40 millimeter stone. I drew these ribbons facing so they're going this way. I think I'm going to curl them the other way when I add them to the bezel here. So basically this pendant, the reason it's a kind of a beginner pendant is there's really only two components. There's the bezel with a bottom on it, and then these little ribbon things that we solder to it. So I'm going to add some reinforcement. I'm going to use thin sheet on the bottom, so I'm going to add some reinforcement to the side of the bezel in order to make this a strong, secure kind of connection. That doesn't have a tendency to bend the bezel, but I'm using 18 gauge sheet for that. I cut a couple of strips of that like this. So we'll see how that works. So I think it'll be a straightforward one, but first let's start by making the bezel. This is 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, and this is 26 gauge, so it's a little on the thicker side, which makes for a nice, stronger support. Set two pieces of this 18 gauge. I'm going to use some 26 gauge for the bottom of the bezel. And then I'll probably use a little bit of square wire. I have some around here somewhere. Maybe a little 14 gauge square to add a little reinforcing thing on the inside of the bezel. I'll show you that when we get to there. But let's start by filing this flat. Oh, if you're new to my channel, I use pretty much always hard silver solder in sheet form, and then I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. Looks like I need to fill my spray bottle too. I have a little show tonight, so I have to get my video shot, and then I have to get ready for that show. It's at a pub, so Sometimes those pub shows you can sell more because people are a little bit lubricated with alcohol. If you like what you see during this video, check out some of my other videos. I have about 200 videos now. And there's a lot of content for multiple levels. So even if it's just to get ideas for projects, you know, you're welcome to use my ideas. We all kind of borrow from each other a little bit. It's all right. That's how you learn. I've seen a few people who've sent me pictures of the pieces they've made based on some of my videos that I thought were superior to what I made by a long ways a couple of times. So I really like it when people show me what they made based on my tutorials. So everybody brings their own little special thing to it, and it's kind of cool. Oftentimes they bring something that I should have thought of but didn't think of. That's what's fun about this. If you're doing a big bezel like this, they're kind of flimsy, so it's hard to get them to where they push together at the ends when you're getting ready to solder them closed. I'll show you a trick that I figured out a long time ago. When you have them, I usually solder them in a square or a rectangle shape with the bezel joint right in the middle of a side there like that. Problem with this, with a big bezel, they have a tendency to pop off like that and slip. So if you put a little dimple in the bottom like that, it makes this overall thing a little springier. When I push them past each other and then bring them together, they'll be pushing together a little bit tighter. They tend to stay nicely, as long as you have a good filing job. I get asked about my torch quite a bit. I use a Smith acetylene air torch. It's got a tank under the table for acetylene, and then it just draws in atmospheric air through these little vents. So it's perfect for silversmithing. It's not so hot that you burn things up too much, but it's definitely hot enough for what you need to do. You can't get zoned out on the flame while you're doing it, which is easy to do. So I could use thicker sheet for the back, but doing a big pendant like this, you've already got quite a bit of weight, and it's not really, for the most part, it's not a structural thing. But for this one, since we're attaching the bail pieces to the base, kind of where the thin sheet's going to be, like I said, I'm going to add a little bit of extra strength on the inside, and I'll show you how I do that in a minute. But for the most part, we're making just a typical bezel setting for a cabochon. Check my I have my playlists on my channel split into not only different types of projects like rings, pendants, bracelets, hair stuff, things like that. I also have it split into easy, intermediate, and more difficult projects. So you can kind of, some of those valuations are a little bit subjective from my perspective. However, it should give you a general idea which ones are appropriate for your level. use some of this 26 gauge. I probably can pull it out of the corner here. Whenever I have somebody in class, I always tell them to cut pieces off the corner of the sheet because it uses things most efficiently, and to cut 90-degree angles rather than sawing out weird shapes and stuff like that. Inevitably, there's somebody in my class who decides that they want to cut it right out of the middle, you know, so they'll like cut here, bend it up, and then snip. It's like that is the least efficient way to do things. That always makes me laugh, though. People think so differently. That was what was interesting about teaching in high school as well, was how many different ways kids approach learning, and how some of them learn one way better than another way. So it's interesting. Everybody's a little bit different that way. One of the things about doing bigger bezels like this that I struggled with at first, this is a common theme with bezels. When you're going to solder these down, in order to get both pieces up to the 1450 degrees that the hard silver solder melts at, which I need it to be in order for it to stick to it, I need to get the sheet and the bezel up to that 1450 degrees at about the same time so that the solder flows and sticks to both of them. If one of them isn't quite there but the other one is, it'll stick just to the one that has. Okay. The other issue with a big bezel like this is because the sheet on the bottom here is against the pad and this one's sitting here up exposed to the flame, we're heating from above. That bezel is really exposed and easy to melt before you ever get that sheet up to temperature. So sometimes what people will do is they'll use like a tripod so they can access the bottom of it with the heat. Another thing you can do, and I do this once in a while when I have a big bezel like this, is I'll tip it up with my pick and then I'll heat from the bottom until the solder starts to flow, and then I'll set it back down and continue going from the top. That way all the heat's concentrated underneath away from the bezel where it's not directly hitting the bezel. Beginners oftentimes, and I did this a lot at the beginning, was melt their bezel before they ever get things going, you know, where they get it almost soldered on and then the bezel starts to melt in one spot or something. So that's super frustrating as a beginner. The issue there is usually not getting the bottom hot enough. Okay. The other thing is, like I said, it could use thicker sheet, but that makes it even harder to get that piece of sheet on the bottom up to temperature because it's got more mass versus this little tiny thing here as far as mass-wise comparatively. So that makes it even more challenging. So I usually suggest to beginners not to use real thick sheet on the bottom because that makes it a little hard to solder. So let's cut myself some more solder here. Well, this is kind of a beginner-ish project. You probably might want to get a few smaller bezels under your belt before you ever try one this big. Especially if you're using a less hot torch, because getting that much metal up to that temperature is harder with those propane torches, or especially those little butane torches that a lot of people start with. They look like creme brulee torches. The very first time I tried creme brulee, I almost threw because it was so rich. And so I never really much cared for it after that. Make sure you use plenty of solder when you're doing a big one like this. The way I solder them is I put them on the inside here, tuck them up against the edge so they're touching. Honestly, if you have a good contact between the bezel and the sheet all the way around, you could put them all in one spot and it will wick all the way along the entire seam. However, I don't always have it completely touching everywhere, and so sometimes it helps if you spread them out a little bit. Once I start heating this again a little bit, that flux will get gooey and then they'll kind of stick down in those spots, and then I should be able to tip it up if I need to in order to get it hot enough from the bottom. Let's see if we can do that. So I'm going to heat it a little bit to get that flux a little sticky. push these up against the side wall. Make sure they're touching. Okay, you want to see what I meant? Like, get underneath it from below like this. Get it to where the solder actually starts to flow a little bit. Set it up top like this. And make sure it's in contact all the way around. Once that solder is flowing, it's much easier. I'm tapping it just a little bit to make sure there's no gaps. That sometimes helps me, because inevitably I'll get it like all the way around except for 2% of it right here. I missed the spot or something, so I'll have to go back and reheat it, but I think we probably got it that time, so cool that guy off. I'm going to go ahead and trim off the excess sheet. Just file it down even. Okay, got that. Now, let's find that piece of square wire. So, these guys are going to attach up here, here like that, and then curve around like little horns on a bighorn. Maybe I should have called this a bighorn pendant. But I think I'm going to, at least the top half of this or so, I'm going to make a piece of square wire that I can put right in the bottom and solder in there to give it a little reinforcement. So I have that situated in there kind of nicely. I'm going to go ahead and I'll probably pick solder a little bit of solder in here. Pick soldering is one of those things that move me from an amateur to a slightly less amateur person. So I'm going to flux it. I'll pick up a piece of solder on the end of the pick. I'll heat the whole thing till it's about that temperature, and then I'll touch it where I want it to go. And if I've gotten it to the right temperature, it should stick it, you know, it should just jump right on there. So. So what I was doing earlier, I was making sure that it was soldered both to the bottom and to the inside edge of the bezel there. That way it'll give it a really stiff surface. It's stronger. So. Okay, so now so I've got to kind of look at it to figure out where I'm going to attach these. I want them to be pretty symmetrically spaced, but it's hard on something like this to get them just exactly right. Especially when you have a wavy pattern on your stone and it kind of throws your eye off. But we got basically 40 millimeters, right? So 20 millimeters should be the center, basically. I think I'm going to use my bail making pliers to spiral this. But right now, these are pretty work hardened because I actually rolled this stuff out myself. So. Annealing is where you heat it up to the point where it's kind of a dull red color. And what it does is it gets rid of any work hardening that you caused by working it back and forth, or twisting it, or pounding it. When you do that kind of stuff, it makes the silver harder and harder. So this reverses that. Gives you kind of a little bit of a glow to it, just a tiny bit, and let it cool off. While that's cooling, these are bail making pliers. I really like these ones. They have really nice straight ends on them. They also make these kind, which have varying sizes of cylinders, so you can get different size loops and stuff. But for what I'm doing today, this one will probably work the best. I think I'll wrap it around this smaller piece here. So, okay, so I'm thinking, since we want it to spiral next to each other, we're going to have to do it at a pretty steep angle. So let's see. I have to do a little experimenting. I think I had it too steep of an angle. That one looks okay that way. So I guess I'm going to have to go the opposite direction. Turned off the camera for a minute so I could play with the different configurations that I could do here. And I thought about, tilting them slightly like that for the chain to go through that way, but I think I like it better if I do it sort of like where it's like a continuation. The tube is all in a straight line like that. So the trick will be getting these cut off just right. I think let's give it a try, and then if I have to move it, I'll move it a little bit. I think that should work. I think I'm going to use the magnesia block here, and then I can kind of use a pin or something to kind of prop this up so it's in the configuration that I want. I have these little T-pins over here somewhere. I'm going to cool that off and see how it looks as far as... Okay, so I looked at it and I did a little bit of slight bending up here to get these a little more symmetrical. I think that's on there pretty good. Alright, so let that pickle and finish it up in a bit. Got things pretty much polished up here. I'm back from the show. I wanted to show you what I did. I put some smaller ones in the bottom here outside of where that square wire that we soldered on the inside edge is. And then I'm going to put a couple more above that just to raise it up a skosh. Because this one comes to a relatively narrow edge on it, so I want to set it up pretty high. Right. A lot of people use different tools than I do. They use what's called a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool, and those are fine. A lot of people use those. I have a tendency to use the flat side of the needle nose pliers and the rounded side to burnish with. So I have a couple of spots here that I may need to use a knife blade to get in there, though. But we're just going to kind of push it up first against there. And the last stage is called burnishing. I'm going to use the smooth outer part here, and I'm going to rub the top edge right up where it meets the stone. Something like malachite is kind of soft, so you want to be careful. You don't want to slip too much over the stone, because it'll scratch the stone. I forgot I was going to put some balls on the bottom, but I guess that's okay. I had a busy day today, so next time I'll add some balls. So I'll go back and I'll do a little touch up on the top here with the Dremel to smooth out any spots that look kind of rough. But overall, I think that's going to be our pendant. Chain will run through there. Kind of look pretty cool. So, all right. It was the ribbon veil pendant. I hope you enjoyed that and got something out of it. I think I like how it came out, and I'm happy that I did this one. So thanks for coming to my channel. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button before you leave, that helps out a great deal. I appreciate your comments and suggestions. And don't forget to check out the video description for some of those pertinent links for my channel. Those kind of things help me out with supporting the channel as far as allowing me to buy more materials and things like that. So both your encouragement in the comments as well as your financial contributions make this channel possible and help to keep me in supply so I can keep making these videos. So thank you for those things. I really appreciate it. Take care. Happy silversmithing.